first webinar. It's the first time that we are trying this format, and we're very excited to be trying this with a topic that is very important to us around business plan for new cafes. So some of you might already have a cafe, or some of you might be in the process of opening a cafe or thinking of opening a cafe. And we'll get back to that. But it's exciting to see multiple different people from all around the country or all around the world having the same goal, which is getting into the cafe business. So hopefully you can get a lot of that out of this session. But before I get more into the workbook itself and how it works, I'll hand over to Anton Greenfield, founder of Zest Coffee.
G'day, everybody. Nice to see you out there. Thank you for joining us. I'm Anton, founder of Zest Specialty Coffee Roasters. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us. 2009, I founded Zest Coffee, and we bought our first coffee roaster. It was a cute little red Topo 15-kilo roaster. Very humble beginning for a coffee that was actually, Zest Coffee was voted Australia's favorite coffee this year. So we've come a long way, and we're really pleased and proud of that fact. And we love what we do. We love the coffee that we're brewing. And from the start, we've always been passionate about flavor, about creating coffees that people remember, and about building a brand that acts as a magnet for our cafe partners. Just as importantly, we've always believed that in providing a genuine 360-degree support service that really helps cafes not just survive but thrive, especially in today's current climate, difficult climate. Our mantra has always been that cafe success is our priority. Over the years, we've worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of cafe owners, and again, we have the same questions that come up, and that is why I'm so excited to share the Cafe Business Plan Workbook with you. It's a practical, real-world document that's designed to help you sharpen your vision, stay on track, move closer to your dream destination as a cafe owner. With that, I'll hand over to Brother Rod, my fellow partner in crime and coffee owner. Thank you.
Thank you, Anton. Yep, welcome everyone. I'm Rod, one of the owners of Zest. But I wanted to introduce myself tonight, not just as a presenter, but as a fellow business owner, fellow battler, you might say, working hard to keep the ship headed in the right direction towards the destination that we've set for ourselves. And I'm really glad to have all of you on board tonight. As we know, in the old days, the mariners and explorers had a pretty tough gig. They set out across vast oceans with knowing very little certainty really of where they were going, limited knowledge, limited resources, limited tools for charting their course. What they did have was, you might say, a rough world map. They learned from others that have been across the oceans, and they tried to put it together. And they had the compass, and they had the stars, and a little bit later on they had the sextant for dead reckoning. But above all, they had a bucket load of courage and determination and a willingness to face the perils of the journey. And why am I saying all that? Well, I think that running a cafe today could feel just about as perilous as that. Big waves, strong headwinds at the moment. Sometimes we feel that the boat's fairly battered, but here's the thing, just like those mariners of old, we still need a plan, we still need a map, and we still need the inspiration and the courage to push towards our destination. And that's why we put so much effort here at Zest into this Cafe Business Plan Workbook. It's a key tool to help our customers, help our partners, help cafes out there to chart your journey and navigate through uncertainty and to give you confidence to steer towards success. Before I hand back to Simon to give you some detail, I just wanted to leave you with this thought that every sailor knows one rule above all others, and that is that you've got to keep your boat facing into the waves. No matter how big or how small the waves, if you turn away, you broadside them, you might say cower, they'll roll you over. They'll capsize you. So let's not cower or be intimidated by today's winds and waves that we know that we face with the economy like it is, the cost of living and costs going up. But let's face them head on, keep our course, and continue through our journey towards our goals. And I just want to say that we at Zest are with you guys in it, and we're here to support wherever we can. So thank you, and I'll pass on to Simon.
Thank you, Rod. So I hope that you all know how to swim, because we might be facing rough waves. And if you don't know how to swim, well, this is your life vest. Yeah, and this is called the Cafe Business Plan Workbook. So again, as Rod has mentioned, we deal with hundreds, if not thousands, of cafe owners. A lot of people open a cafe as a new business. It's new to them, and we keep having the same questions. And we have the benefit of having a lot of insights from the experience that we have, having this massive network of people that we have worked with over the years. And we have compiled all of the best practices in terms of opening a new cafe into this tool. And again, our philosophy is always around finding win-win situations and making, for example, cafes do really well, so that if you're doing really well and we're partnering together, we're also doing well. So this is all about finding partnerships and finding win-win situations with you. So this tool that we have right here is under the form of an Excel spreadsheet. Now, this spreadsheet, if you have a look at the bottom, we have approximately 29 tabs, if I remember correctly. It's a very thorough, dense piece of equipment that you'll have to help you navigate the initial steps of opening your cafe. Now, this tool is entirely free. You'll have a link to download it and play around with it afterwards. And what I'll do during this session is I'll give you an overview of how to use this tool, what we have in some of the different tabs, and I'll go a little bit more in details in some of the tabs that I find really interesting and that I find bring a lot of value to anyone that's about to open a cafe or to any current cafe owner. But just so you know, we have tested this tool with people who are about to open a cafe, with cafe owners that have been operated for years. We've had tremendous feedback on it, whether it's in order to give you some direction prior to opening, or whether it is in the day-to-day running the operations and making sure that you're always on top of all of your costs of goods sold and everything. So I hope that you find some value one way or another with this workbook. And just so you know, we won't be covering the entire workbook, because like we said, it's a very dense document. But if you ever want to, at the end, we can schedule a one-on-one session if you had further questions, if you needed to explore it a bit more in details. But without any further ado, let's get started. So you can see that you'll be able to navigate this workbook with all the different tabs at the bottom. So there's obviously here an introduction as to what the workbook is. And the first couple of tabs that you'll find all cover what I would call the genesis of your project. And that's all of the strategy, all of the thinking that happens before you even sign a lease for your space. So things like, why are you even in business? Why is it you're trying to open a cafe? What are you trying to achieve? Is it purely financially that you want to open a cafe? Is it just to make money? Or is this a personal dream of yours? Do you want to be sharing specific types of food, etc.? That is one of those things that we find is extremely crucial, and it's important to have that clear, because that will determine a lot of the following steps along your journey. This will determine the kind of cafe that you're about to open, so the cafe model that we'll have and we'll talk about. This will determine your concepts, and then all of these things will trickle down to then the type of business model that you have, the type of revenue model that you decide to have, and the offering that you decide to have in your cafe. So the first couple of tabs, they might seem, I might say, trivial, but from experience, we can guarantee you that this is essentially the final destination that you want to have, where you want to end up in the end. And then the rest of the tool will help you build that map to get to that destination. As Rod was mentioning, we love the sailing analogy, because in that purpose, in that overview, in the foundations, in this initial genesis of the workbook, this is putting together, having an idea of what the destination is. Where are we heading? And if it's not clear for you as an owner or as a future owner, it will be difficult for it to be clear for the rest of your team. So we definitely recommend going through all of these ones. And again, this will help you determine something that is crucial, which is the type of cafe that you're opening. Because when we say I'm about to open a cafe, there's about 10 different types of models of cafes that you can have. You could have a coffee cart, sort of like something that moves every single day. It could be a hole in the wall with no seating and takeaway, all the way to having something that is a bakery cafe, or something like an all-day brunch cafe type of serving coffee and food service all day long. Or you could even be open at nights, like having a liquor license and serving wine, beer at nights. So there's a whole range of different types of cafes that you could be having. So we've listed all of these different models, and you'll see that you'll find the use of these different models along the different tabs. Something to keep in mind as well is that all of the tabs are connected. So every single time that we input some information into one of the tabs, so for example, if I go into this one, the site selection, that's one that I really enjoy personally. All of the information that you'll input in here will carry through all of the different tabs of the workbook. So generally speaking, we would recommend filling out all of the tabs in a chronological order, because in some of the future tabs, and we'll get back to that in a minute, you'll see that you need some of your inputs from the previous ones. So this particular tab, I find it interesting because it is a way for you to look at finding your sites for your cafe. So what are the different factors that you think are important? And again, we have taken all of these best practices from working with some of the best cafes around the country, and we've put all of these criteria, laid them down, and created sort of like a framework that should help you find the right spot for your cafe. So for example, here we take into account factors like foot traffic, parking, zoning and permits, the different rent, the rent and the costs of having that space, etc. And if you scroll down a little bit, we have also built a tool that helps you determine whether that's good value rent or not. And the reason why we have done this tool is, for those of you who've already been through that journey or about to go through that journey, you'll see that sometimes we make decisions based on our emotions, and we can make decisions that are a little bit irrational. And this tool is your anchoring towards making a decision that is rational. So sometimes we might find a spot that looks absolutely stunning and we love the place, but it might be over our budget, or it might just be a bad value for money for a specific area. So in here, you can input the rents per annum based on the square meter that you have, and it'll give you a dollar costs per square meter. And using the free map tool and the walk score, you'll sort of have an idea of what is the foot traffic for your site, and also, is this a good location based on the map? And you'll have a good idea whether this estimation for your rent is a good value compared to a specific area. So here, for example, for that specific site in a specific location, we can see that we would be paying $857 with an average area comparison of $800 to $1,200 per square meter per year. So that means that this site seems to be a good value. And again, you can be changing the numbers. What if the rent goes up to 60,000 in a few years? And you can see that number changes here immediately, 1,071. We're still within that range, and I can help you make this assumption. So I won't go too much in detail into that, but you can see the level of technicality that this tool can allow you to go into. So that part, all of the site selection, cafe layout, startup costs, they are what I would call the early stages of your cafe. So you have refined your concepts, you have a strategy, you probably have a name already, you probably might have even registered a business, and you go into, okay, now let's find somewhere where we can operate. Let's look at what the cafe looks like. So we have a sort of like mapping of the layout of your cafe, which you can use. There's also a calculator built in that allows you to have an idea of how many tables you should be having based on the size of your cafe. And then you can cost all of that using this calculator of startup costs. So everything is included into that tool. Things like the legal fees, all of the architect fees, any renovations that you might be doing, plumbing, electricity. You can basically input all of that into this spreadsheet and then have an idea of, okay, it's going to cost me this much. Now, of course, you could be doing that yourself on your own Excel spreadsheets. But the reason why we did it here, and the reason why we would strongly suggest using that tool, is it communicates with all of the future tabs that we have. So that rent per year that we input in the previous tab, it will carry on into the profit and loss at the very end, for example, and will carry on onto some of the future tabs. And by the way, I haven't mentioned this, but you need to just so you know, none of the, because this is done offline, you'll download the calculator and you can access it yourself. None of the information that you put is made public. Like this stays private. We don't have access to any of this information, just in case like you think this is a sensitive topic. This is purely just for you to be using. So you can input whatever information you want. Now, going into what I would say is my personal favorites on this tool, and what I think is probably the most valuable based on the experience that I have dealing with cafe owners, and that's the ingredients, consumable, and the drink and food menu. So it's not just one tab, it's the ingredients, beverage recipes, drinks menu, food recipes, food menu. So we got 5 tabs covering this topic, and this covers what we call the cost of goods sold. Now, the cost of goods sold is the cost of all of the ingredients that we've used in order to make the products that we're selling. So when we're making a coffee, the cost of obviously the water that we're using, the milk that we're using, and the coffee beans that we're using, all of that goes into the cost of goods sold. And same thing for any of the food items that we have in our cafe. Now, this tab is particularly interesting because there's a very long list, as you can see, of ingredients that you might be finding in a cafe or in a restaurant. So I'm not going to go through all of them because there's hundreds of different lines. And you can see that here you can put the brands that you're buying, for example, for your aioli. You can put the supplier that you have. You can change the pack size and then the units of measure. It might be in grams, it might be in kilos, it might be in boxes or whatever. And you can put your cost price. So these are sort of benchmarks based on the Melbourne market. But of course, if you're overseas or if you're in a different area, the price might be very different. You can change the currency as well if you wanted to, have it in euros or any other currency. But these are sort of like benchmarks in terms of like prices. And once you've put this all of the information onto this tab, the beauty of it is that it will carry on into the following ones. So, for example, here we've put say the cost of our milk as well. I believe that the cost of coffee should be somewhere here as well. And we'll find the coffee in the. Oh, we have the cost of coffee here, for example. So, coffee beans for black coffee, our milk-based blends, and then maybe a bag of filter and 250 gram. We can see $12. So, see, we've input the cost of coffee here. And when we go into beverage recipes, for example, in the next one, you can also see the cost of your coffee, which you can edit here. And this is awesome because you'll get an overview of how much every single coffee costs you. And this will help you determine the price at which you'll be selling them. So here you can edit the dose of your recipe. So whether you're using 22 gram, 21 gram, 20 gram, or even less, the average wastage that you might have if you're considering it's 5% or more. And then it will give you a cost per single shot or cost per double shot. So you can see that if we're paying $36 a kilo, the cost for a double shot is 83 cents. Now, if I change that number and I move up to $40 a kilo, I'm now at 93 cents. So this is not only useful just to cost the every single item that you have on the menu, but it can also help you navigate certain decisions when it comes to choosing a specific supplier or choosing a specific coffee blend. Let's say you have one blend that's at $35 a kilo, but you're not in love with it, and there's another blend that's at $40 a kilo, this tool immediately shows you the price difference between these two options. So let's say one of them is, let's say this one is 35, the other one is 40. And you can see that if we're using a, let's say 20-gram dose for each of these with a 5% wastage, you can see that for a double shot, the cost difference is only 10 cents for double shots, but you might be getting a substantially better blend at that price. And this is one of the many things that this tool can help you do. It can help you put numbers and put figures on a decision-making process, and it can help you with that. Now, if I zoom out, you can see that here we have a whole bunch of different drinks that you'll find on the menu, even things like the beetroot latte, for example. But if I go into, let's say, a small cappuccino. So right now we can see that the small cappuccino is costing us 97 cents based on some of the previous information that we have added. And if on the sides, on the left-hand side, you can see some of these plus signs. So if I go onto the cappuccino and I click on the plus sign, it basically extends the line and it shows me exactly what are the ingredients that we have inside of that cappuccino. So here we can see that we have one single shot of espresso, and we can see that the cost is 42 cents, which basically fetches the price up here. And then on top of that, we have 220 mils of milk at $4.60 for 2 liters, which is costing us 51 cents. So you can actually see very visually, very clearly here that the cost of milk on that coffee is, we're spending more money on milk than on coffee itself. 51 cents on milk, 42 cents on coffee. And then 4 cents on chocolate powder, if you're adding chocolate powder, etc. And that's for a dine-in. If you do the same thing for a takeaway, you'd also see the cost of the takeaway cup, 8 cents, and the cost of the takeaway lid, 6 cents, which adds to a total of $1.11. So again, with this tab, you'll be able to have a perfect overview of your cost of goods sold on everything. And again, when we carry on to the next one, you'll see all of these drinks that we've added. You can also create your own drinks as well at the bottom of the previous page. And now that we have the cost of ingredients, we can also see this. We can play around with the sell price that we have, and we can see our gross profits. So our gross profit is the sell price minus the cost of ingredients, or cost of goods sold. And for example, here, if I look at that cappuccino, it's costing me 97 cents. And if I'm selling it at $5, I'm making a gross profit of 81%, which should be roughly your benchmark. If I'm selling that one at $4.50, you can see that I'm now dropping to 78 cents, which might still be okay for you, but you want to be playing around with these numbers. What if I go to 5.5? Then I'm going up to 82% GP. My gross profit here in dollar value is going to be reflected there. So this not only allows you to have, aim for those targets of 70 to 85% GP, but it also helps you do your forecasting. So when you get a better idea of how many coffees you might be selling per week, you can start using this tab and say, well, I think per week I might be selling 5 ristrettos, and I might be selling 200 of these cappuccinos, and 200 of this one and 100 of that one. And it will sum up all of them and say, if you're selling this combination of drinks, it means that every single week you'll be selling 2,275 drinks with an average gross profit of 79%, for a total cost of goods sold of 2,466. And this number is crucial because that will help you with your forecasting later. So again, obviously we don't necessarily know when we're about to open a cafe how many of these drinks we're going to be selling, but this at least we can play with different scenarios. And this will give us an idea of, okay, with drinks only, I could be making roughly $13,000 to $14,000 a week. My cost of goods sold will be around $2,500, which means that I'll have close to $11,000 to pay for rent, pay for staff, pay for all of the different expenditures that we have. So that's it for, which I think is one of the most valuable tab on the entire workbook. We've done the exact same thing for the food menu, which I'm not going to go too deep into that, but you can see that for every single item that you might have on your food menu, breakfast burrito, you can see the breakdown of each different ingredients. You can also change the ingredients of that. So you can create your own menu item at the beginning. So here, for example, if I go into this one, new menu item, I extend it here, and I can fetch, for example, have something that has aioli inside and have something that has fresh asparagus. And what else can we add to it? Something that has avocado. That's probably going to be a terrible dish, but don't quote me on that recipe. But you can see that here, then we can start saying, okay, for this dish, I'll add 10 grams of aioli, I'll have 100 grams of asparagus, and I'll have 100 grams of avocado. And this dish is costing me $2.42. So super easy to create new dishes, super easy to edit some of the ones that you might already have on your menu. We've done a lot of the work as well, so you don't necessarily need to create everything. You could just use some of the ones that we have and edit it yourself. And in the next tab, you'll see the exact same thing that we did for the drinks menu. So ingredient costs, sell price, gross profits in dollar value and in percentage, and how many per week we might be selling, and it will give you your total gross profit and sales for the week. Again, this is just a pure example that we have. It might look very different for you if you have a hole in the wall, sort of like cafe operation, you're only doing sort of like takeaway toasted sandwiches, or if you're a massive venue with a big sit down area. So it might look very, very different. But this is giving you an overview of all of the things that you can be doing. Now, there's other tabs such as like how to choose a POS system, because there's a lot of options out there, or how to build a team, how to staff. But the last part of the workbook is what I would call all of the financials. Now, all of the different financial tools that help you forecast before you open your business, but also run your business on a daily basis. And here we have the budgeting for expenses. That's essentially all of your different expenses that you might have on a weekly basis, monthly basis, yearly basis. So the occupancy costs, your operational expenses, things like all of the things that don't go into like staffing or rent or cost of goods sold. The things that we don't necessarily think of, but if you've operated businesses in the past, you will know that there's always expenses that we might not be thinking of. And at least we've listed all of them. So then you can think of, yeah, never thought of the cost of loyalty programs or loyalty cards, or, oh yeah, true, I'll have to do a photo shoot or video shoot at some point. It's going to cost me this much. And in this tab, you can put it as a weekly value and have a look at, what are my FPOS costs? What are my legal costs on a weekly basis? Bookkeeping costs, etc. You'll see that as a dollar value and as a percentage of your revenue. And these are key metrics. And you have other non-operating income and expenses here. And the rest of the tabs would be all of the different financial tools that you'll need when you're operating. So the break-even calculator is one of the most important one. This one is linked to all of the previous steps that we've done, because the break-even point of a business is how much revenue you need to be making in order to not lose money and not make money. That's sort of like that in between profit and loss. And this depends on things like how many products you'll be selling and all of your fixed costs, like your payroll, which we've input in some of the staffing tab, your occupancy costs, your rents, but also your gross profit that we had in the ingredients page. So that goes back to the entire importance of, you need to technically fill out the tabs as you go in a chronological order, because then this tab will be fetching the values from the previous ones. And you can see that our break-even points would be, in this case, as a forecast, $11,800. That means that as a prediction, as a forecast, I need to make $11,800 a week in order to break even, in order to make sure I'm not losing any money. If I make $15,000 in that week, then I'm making a profit. If I'm making less than that, I should be making a loss. And this is the interactive one. So this is the one that you can be changing. You can't be changing that one. This one is based on the previous information you've input, and this one is the one that you can change. And this one will show you. It's a very quick way for you to say, okay, what if I'm spending a little bit less money on stuff? What if I'm spending 5,000 instead of 5,600? What if I manage to decrease my occupancy expenses to 1,500 instead of 1,900? But I might be spending a little bit more money into operating expenses, and I think my gross profit can be boosted to 82%. And then you can see that when that's the case, when you're playing around with the numbers, you can see that if you manage to get these numbers to that level, your break even goes down. So you don't need to make as much money each week because you might be making a bit more profit on each item, or you might be spending a little bit less money overall. So great tool to use prior launching. And then once you've launched, things like your P&L forecasts, your balance sheets, I mean, you can use that as a forecast tool. You can use that as you're tracking, as you're operating. You can set your KPI, so all of your targets as well. How many, what sales we want to have per week? What is our gross profit targets? What is the number of customers we want to see? It's the number of transactions. And again, you can use that as a forecast tool or as sort of like as a benchmark once you start operating. So it doesn't lose its value once you start opening your shop. It's there. It's with you. It shows you. It's sort of like a way for you to be to have a benchmark when you're operating. It sort of like guides you and shows you the way. And the last one is our financial ratios, which are really important ratios to keep in mind. And they are ratios that any large business would be looking at constantly to look at the health of a business at any given time. And there could be things like your prime cost percentage, which is your cost of goods sold and labor divided by sales multiplied by 100. It's an index basically that will give you a benchmark that shows you what your two biggest costs represents out of your total revenue. If these two numbers are too high, you're probably spending too much money on labor or cost of goods sold, and you might be reviewing one of these two. And again, all of these numbers, you don't have to put anything in here because it fetches the previous values, like I said. Things like your sales per square meter, that shows you basically, it tells you if your venue is too big or too small, if you're not making enough money per square meter. It might be that you have a lot of dead space and this space is not ideal. So again, obviously, this makes a lot more sense once you've opened. But if you haven't opened yet, the way that we would recommend using it is as a simulation. You can start creating, you can actually save this tool under multiple different names. So you can have multiple different scenarios and call one of these documents scenario 1 with a pessimistic scenario 2 with a realistic scenario, and scenario 3 with an optimistic scenario, and compare all of the numbers with 3 very different business models or 3 different estimations in terms of revenue and forecast in terms of revenue and sales. So again, I could spend days, if not weeks, talking about this and all of the things that you can do with it. But I think by now you should have a pretty good idea of the extent of things that you can do with this tool. There's a lot that you can do. The more time you spend with it, the more you realize that it's sort of limitless, and the limit is really just the time that you spend on it. So maybe some of you have some questions now regarding this. Let me have a look at the chat right now.
I think we can just open the floor a little here, Simon, with the people we've got on board. Some people may not have been able to use the chat function due to their phones, etc. So if anybody's got a specific question, now's the time to ask. And if you feel it's, might say, too tailored to you and you don't want to waste people's time, pop it in the chat. If you haven't seen that, there's a couple of polls in there as well to help guide us, and we'll definitely be in touch as a team.
Simon, so far the the most popular response to the poll up on the chat is managing finances and COGS. So if you wanted to maybe if you can dive deeper into those tools where they're doing the menu, like setting out the menu costs.
Yep. Yeah, I'm not surprised that this is one of the I think one of the most popular functionality of this tool, or because in our experience, we meet cafe owners almost on a daily, weekly basis. Cafe owners that don't necessarily know at any given point how much a cup of coffee is costing them, or how much an avocado toast on toast is costing them, and this is a bit of a tricky one, because you need to constantly control your cost of goods sold, because that determines your gross profits, and your gross profit basically determines whether you're working for something, if there's going to be any money left at the end of the week or not. Your gross profit is sort of like one of the biggest benchmark in your profitability. If you don't have any gross profit, you won't have any money left to pay staff, pay rents, etc. Or you will need to have substantially more volume in order to compensate for that. And that, like, that's definitely something that we notice with very successful operators. Usually will know the costs of every single item on the menu, or the gross profit in terms of margin or dollar value. So maybe do you guys want to deep dive more into the food recipe side of things, or more into some of the other financials, or I can go into the coffee side of things, because we're a coffee company. I think that makes a lot of sense. So if I go back into this one, I think for me, this is one of the most valuable one, especially when it comes to choosing which coffee you want to be using. Having the ability to look at different options is, I think, like a very appealing proposition. So, for example, even things like, should I be using 22 grams or 20 grams in my basket every single time I make a double shot? I personally, from experience, from a technical point of view, I think for milk-based coffees, you'll have better results with 22 grams. But if you were concerned about saving money on that, which is a legitimate concern because you'd be using 10% less coffee, let's actually put a dollar value to it, and you can see that going down by 2 grams would save you 7 cents per coffee. But if the quality goes down dramatically, then I would say that's not a 7 cents that you should be saving. You could probably find other ways to save the 7 cents. Sorry, Roy, you had a question. You had a hand up. You're on mute.
Sorry. I just didn't want to run out of time. We've had a good question come through as well regarding a little bit more about the advertising and marketing side of things, which we haven't really touched on at all tonight. Just wondered if you wanted to look at the marketing plan.
Yeah, absolutely. So marketing, I think, for those of you who don't have as much, experience running businesses or working in different businesses, but marketing is essentially how you attract people, is how you get more people through the doors. Because there's just to keep in mind, there's two ways that you can increase your sales. Either you get more customers into your business, or you sell more to each customer. The job of marketing is to bring more people into the shop. And there's maybe other things you can do inside of the shop to try and sell them more things, which you can argue goes into marketing. But our entire strategy around marketing is, how do we get more people through the doors? How do we get people to come back more often? And here they are. The first thing that you want to do is segment your markets, understand who your target is, who your core customers are going to be, who is in that area, because that's how because you're going to be addressing a message. You're going to be communicating to them in a very different way. So if you're close to university, for example, your age average is probably going to be very different than if you're in Potts Point in Sydney, where the age average is substantially older. It means that the way you communicate, maybe your menu is also different, and the message is going to be very different. So that segmentation is important in order to know how we're going to be addressing ourselves to different people. Now, marketing is both digital and physical. So you've got to ask yourself, what is our brick and mortar or paper marketing going to look like? Are we going to have signs out of the shop? Are we going to be sending letters or mailing information into the neighborhood in letter boxes? Or is our strategy primarily around the digital side of things? So are we running ad campaigns, or are we creating content in order to generate traction? This has big content-driven strategies, for example, have become extremely popular over the last couple of years. It's a way to, I guess, technically a cheaper way to, you might say, get attention from people and get more people into your shop through the doors of your shop. But it might require a lot of work. Creating good quality content that is being shared and reposted and drives more people into your shop requires not only skills and knowledge, but also a lot of time as well. So is this something that you want to, is this the route that you want to go for? If you're entirely brand new to social media and you don't have much experience with it, maybe not the way that you want to be using marketing. But for example, if you have a lot of connections within your community, then you might be using that. You might be using that to do more traditional marketing, targeting, and segmentation.
Simon,
oh yeah, go for it.
Hello?
Sorry, if I can just
Freddie.
talk to Ebony's question.
I saw on the pause that our last order today was at 1.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, if we can, I think to Ebony's question, what we'd like to show, if you just skim down to show the different parts of the marketing thing. So we go through in-store marketing and promotions. At each point we try and give some ideas of what we can do, and then community engagement, etc. But it really starts way back on the tab right to the left there, which is starting your concept, getting a clear concept, and then that works right through to your brand, your strategy, and then your marketing. And we would love to work with you to help you on that. But Simon, if there's one other thing, if you can just go to the top of the page and just click on that Access Cafe Help, just so that they know about that tab. Is that working there?
I'll just have to change the view of my camera, so just give me 1 second. Can you see now? Yeah.
Yep. So that tab takes you to an area, what we call our cafe resource hub or help hub. And if you just scroll down there, Simon, to the marketing one, marketing your cafe. So if you click on that, it'll give you any things that we've got under marketing, like Instagram tips or whatever. And we're building this the whole time. The other way to do it is, again, Simon, if you go up to the top and you go to the ask a question button, search for answers. So for instance, if you wanted to type in using Instagram, for instance, then it'll come up with anything that's related to that in our Cafe Help portal. I wonder if that helps, Ebony, or if you're welcome to give us a little bit more of a steer of what you were looking for.
So again, there's not just the content of the workbook, is also this resource hub as well that explains the tabs a little bit more in depth, but also can give you some other ideas, as Rod mentioned.
Yeah. So as you're going through the workbook, that's on every page. So if you ever get stuck or you want a bit of inspiration on how to answer a question, you can always go to that Cafe Help Resource Hub. Thank you.
Simon,
So
there's,
right
there's
here.
another question that's come through before we finish up, because we're probably running out of time for some people. But there was a question about how would you search for the right commercial property, obviously cafe property. I don't know if you just wanted to go back to, that page with the walk score and a couple of those other links that run through.
Yes. So did you want to go into the links themselves, or do you want to go through like walk score, for example?
I think the walk score would be interesting for people to have a look at.
Yeah. So I'll type, for example, 42 Berkeley Street in Marrickville, which is where we have our Sydney office.
You got backlit instead of, there, you got it.
Berkeley Street in Marrickville in Sydney. So it'll show you a walk score and a transit score, essentially showcasing if this is easily accessible by on foot or by transport. And you can see 50 minutes by car, 20 minutes by bus, etc. And then using that information, you can combine that with, so you can have your score right here, but you can also combine that with a lot of the other things that you have. So I know, for example, on that street, we don't have a whole lot of foot traffic. So then you can put, let's say, foot traffic is not that great. There's also no parking at all. So maybe have that as a 4. It's very difficult to park, but the power, the gas, water, everything is there. And this will end up building a total score that will help you determine, okay, is this the right location or not for what I'm looking for? But this walk score is quite useful in that sense.
Very good.
So I'm
Thanks,
just
Simon.
seeing I'm just seeing the questions right now. So there's a question from Paolo, who's in Italy. What do you consider the right percentage balance between the cafe side and the food side to achieve a good equilibrium? That's a great question, Paolo. We get this question quite often. And in short, there's no answer because it really depends on what it is you're trying to do. We usually break it down into, are you a coffee first kind of cafe? So sort of like an espresso bar or a specialty cafe, offering primarily coffee and maybe just a little bit of food. And in that case, it might be 90% coffee and 10% food. But if you're a brunch place, or if your focus is primarily food, lunch and breakfast, it might be 70-80% food and 20% coffee. So it all goes back into your concepts. It goes back into what you're trying to do, maybe your strengths as well as an operator. If you have a strong background in cooking, and if you have maybe a lot of contacts in that space, it might make more sense to be focusing on the food side of things. But in terms of businesses, we work with cafes that are 100% coffee. And we work with, because they don't do any food. And we work with businesses that are 90% food and 10% coffee, because it's that their core business is in cooking. So there's no right or wrong answer, but I think you need to be very aware of, are you trying to be both? And speaking from experience, we regularly have this conversation. I don't know many cafes or many venues that manage to be a 10 out of 10 in both. You're usually a little bit higher in one or the other. So I think you need to be realistic on that. Are you primarily focus on food or on coffee? If that answers your question.
Also, then, because there was a whole podcast by Ska USA that say that if you have more than 50% on cafe, you close. This is the same 6-year-old podcast. Because in Italy, we have a strange situation, because we have a transition. Sorry for my English, because we have a great transition from the old style cafe that was based on all on cafe, and we have the use of fast drinking of cafe when changing, and especially if you go to Milan, you see the new format that are coming up. The use of the traditional cafe in Italy is based on cafe, and in the evening we have aperitivi, drink, and so on. But there was a great crisis in this cafe. Now in Milan, you find the cafe that are living are
The traditional.
no, they are a mix between food and cafe, and cause for the low cost of cafe in Italy, because usually we have a cost of €1.50 for a espresso single dose in Italy. In Italy, they drink only a single dose. They cannot live on specialty coffee, and gradually became marginal the coffee side of specialty that are in Milan and Rome essentially. And so it is a strange situation. There is a very strange transition situation. For this, I'd ask, where is the situation in Australia, for example?
So it is very different. Again, like some venues will be primarily focused on coffee because of the way they're set up, because they don't have a kitchen, and then so they'll do like 90% of coffee. I went this morning to a cafe that just recently opened in Sydney called Better Coffee, and they do, I think, 95% coffee. But then there are other cafes that we last week I went to visit one of our accounts that does maybe like 90% food, and then coffee is just a little extra that they do on top. So there's no strict rule per se. And it's when it goes back to making sure that it is in line with your strengths and what you're trying to, what we are trying to achieve, basically. If that makes sense.
Probably the coffee that they sell all the biggest part on the cafe are roasted. For example, if you go to Berlin, you find a bar and so on. They are roaster. They live on essentially on cafe, but they sell the coffee that they roast. This is an equilibrium. But if you sell coffee from another roaster, you are close.
Yeah, it's more difficult, but there are still examples of cafes that sell, I mean, don't necessarily roast them themselves, or not flagships that still do that. But of course, like we would generally argue that you need to have some food just to capture a broader audience and just to sell more to each customer that walk into your doors. So, I mean, maybe a 50-50 can split between food and coffee could be a good option to start. But there's no strict rule in that, because we've seen multiple models work, and not just flagships of cafes. And there's another question from Sylvia that's asking about any specific websites or places like real estate agencies to find commercial space for commercial properties. Sylvia, that is a great question. I cannot answer that question, but maybe I can point you to someone who can. And I think I might be passing the mic to Manny, who works with us at Zest Coffee. Manny is also a cafe operator. He's owned cafes. He's worked in cafes for a very long time. Manny could give us a little introduction of himself, but also his experience in running cafes, and potentially answer Sylvia's question, like how do we find specific commercial spaces?
Hi everyone. Yeah, really good question, Sylvia. Usually most of the time a site will come in your local area. You've probably grown up in an area, or you visit that area quite often, and you see a spot, I would say. In terms of breaching outside of your area and a bit of an unknown suburb, I would definitely then just partner up with a local real estate, or even just like your suppliers, like us, Zest. We definitely can help and do the research and follow up if that area is a good spot to open up a cafe. I hope that answers your question.
And did you want to give us an introduction of yourself, Manny, and maybe your experience as a cafe owner?
Definitely. So thanks, Simon. Hello, everyone. I'm Manny, part of the Zest team here in Victoria as a business development manager. My connection with Zest goes way back, all the way to 2003, when I just finished year 12 and started out as a barista at my local cafe. That's when I first met Rod, Anton, and Roy. Roy was only 13 at the time. And even back then, their passion for coffee and dedication to cafes really stood out. From there, I moved into the kitchen, became a chef, spent years running cafes and restaurants for other business owners. That experience gave me a real understanding for challenges hospitality owners had to overcome. In 2011, I was 23 years young. It was time to take the leap and open my own cafe restaurant, right after the 2009 GFC. Not the best move, some people told me. And to be honest, it felt a lot like Rod's Mariners and Explorers analogy. Storms, headwinds, uncertainty, and no clear map. What made the difference for me was having Zest alongside me. It helped me sourcing equipment, layout design, training, and advice that kept my business afloat through some pretty rough seas. But I often think back, and if I had a tool like the Cafe Business Plan workbook or even the resource hub on our website back then, it would have saved me a lot of time, money, and stress. And I'll probably still have a head full of dark hair, no whites. The truth is, today's storm are just as real. Rising costs, staffing challenges, tighter margins. In my role today, I still see too many owners put little focus on their business plan or costings. They get caught up in the daily grind, and without basics, it's easy to lose direction, sometimes even sink. That's why this workbook is so valuable. It's practical, it gives you a map, a compass, and the confidence to steer towards your goals. No matter what waves come your way, whether it's another GFC or just another challenges that we're facing right now today. So here's my encouragement. Use it, make it your own, and involve your staff. That's very important. So everyone is aligned with the plan. Revisit this plan frequently to make sure you're still on the course, adjusting as the winds and waves change. Zest is here to back you, not just with coffee and training and marketing, but also advice and tools that really make a difference on the bottom line. Thanks for listening to my journey with Zest. Wherever you are in your cafe's journey, I want you to know we've got a crew behind you, and we're here to help you chart the course.
Thank you, Manny. Okay, do you want to say something? No, is that it? Yep. No, that's insightful. It's nice to also have the perspective of someone who owns a cafe, who's operated cafes for a long time. You might hear always on the news that things are tough right now, but of course, like things were tough before. It feels like a never-ending cycle of great financial crisis or recession, or there's never a perfect time to obviously do it. And we actually see many businesses do really well during difficult times, because when it's not just difficult for you, it might be difficult for everyone. And some people would actually argue that you can make even more money during difficult times because it's usually a good way to get market shares, etc. So thanks for sharing that, those insights, Manny. Appreciate that. And maybe we can have one last word from Roy, who's our head of sales. He's director of coffee, but looks after our entire network of customers at Zest. Maybe one last wise word for any aspiring cafe owner, Roy?
Thanks, Simon. Not sure if that's possible, wise words, but I just want to really thank everybody for coming tonight, because time is an investment. So we really appreciate you taking time out of your day. Hope no one's getting too hungry and peckish, but I suppose I just wanted to leave everybody here with one, you might say, takeaway, and that is there's probably more questions that you've now got rather than answers that you've been provided with. And Zest is on the same journey with you. Going by what we're getting in the chat, I think we'll be developing a how to find a cafe site tool. So we really appreciate everybody diving in and helping. And this workbook that we've been going over tonight is really just one component of our 360-degree support network. What is number one to Zest is still coffee flavor. So our coffees is still our number one pillar. Number two, we're building a brand magnet so that those that are, you might say, coming along for the ride can utilize that brand magnet. And then our 360-degree, of which this slots in perfectly. So there'll be a poll coming up shortly, which we'll leave running for a little while once we're all done and dusted. But what do you want next from Zest? And I would say, if you want to learn more about Zest's whole spherical support, we're a coffee roaster. You may want to try some samples or something like that. Choose number one. If you're just wanting a one-on-one about this workbook, we know that every person has a unique story and a unique business. We're also open to that, having an actual one-on-one with you and making sure that this tool is worthwhile. Choose option number two for that. However, if you've got everything you need, you're happy with what you've heard, this tool is useful, you've got your head around it, and you just want to explore it a bit, then choose number three, and we won't bother you too much longer. But we are definitely here if you would like to reach out, because your success is our success. So therefore, your success is our priority. And for anyone that's unable to vote on any of the polls, and we will add that last one into our email that will be sent to you so that you can reach out there. And also what we'll have in there is we will actually have a unique code for you to jump online, click through and get some free samples if that's what you want to do next. So we really appreciate your time. Thank you. It's great to have a worldwide audience here tonight, and a lot of extra people will be listening to this recording, so we appreciate it. Anyone that is listening to the recording or that hasn't been able to join in the polls, etc. tonight, we look forward to hearing directly from you. Feel free to email the team. But once again, thank you all for coming. We will leave this, we'll probably turn our cameras off ourselves, but we will leave this meeting open for an extra couple of minutes so that you can have a look back and click on the link if you need to. But good night and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.